Autodesk refresh season is here again. I hope you have your decorations up and have a party planned to welcome in the new releases. This time of year is always exciting for us Maya users, as we look forward to being lavished with a suite of updates and enhancements, which will mean we can all work smarter, not harder. So what do we have to look forward to this year? Well, technical artists and animators can dig into new rigging nodes and animation tools, whereas modelers get a few new things to play with, plus updates to the Maya Retopology and Boolean workflows. On top of this you have UI updates, updated USD material workflows and Mac M1 architecture support. There's lots to discuss, but in this video I'll be focusing more on rigging, animation and modelling, as these are more my areas of expertise. Okay, let's dive in. Rigging. First, let's take a look at what new rigging tools and techniques we have to play with. To start us off is something that users of the offset parent matrix attributes and nodes, which were introduced a few years ago now, will be excited about, and that's space matrix. If you've followed some of my courses or experimented with matrix nodes and attributes, you will know that sometimes we have to add an extra mult matrix node to our rigs to offset another control's transforms, so we don't end up with a double transform. Let's have a quick look at an example of this setup in action and compare Autodesk's new solution. This ARM rig is set up using offset parent matrix, and as you can see it works pretty well. That is, until we move the root control. What's happening is we are getting the double transform I mentioned previously, so the ARM control is being moved twice the distance, because it effectively has two influences, and one of these is the main root control. To correct this, we need to use a mult matrix node, along with the root control's world inverse matrix attribute, which effectively takes away the root control's influence from the ARM control. Now this stabilises the rig, but we needed to add in extra nodes to do it. What Autodesk have done is given us two new float attributes, pre-space matrix and post-space matrix, which do the work of the mult matrix node for us. So let's reconnect this. We can connect this directly to the blend matrix node here, and then take the world inverse matrix attribute from the root and divert it to the pre-space matrix attribute. This can be deleted now, and the rig is still stable, plus we've reduced the amount of nodes needed to build it, so it's a lot more economical. This is a great solution, but the issue we have is it's not backwards compatible, so like when the original matrix nodes were introduced, they won't be fully usable in our pipelines for a few years. If I load the scene into May 2023, you see we've lost the connection, so the rig is broken. Ideally, Autodesk should issue an update to May 2023, possibly 2022 as well, which would detect this and build a mult matrix node in for us, so a rig built in 2024 can still be animated in earlier versions. Next we have the introduction of the Reorder rotation tool, which has been developed to help eliminate, or at least reduce, the ever-present threat of gimbal lock. As you can see, it offers a percentage showing the risk of the axes clashing, and the option to quickly change to one which would offer less potential issues. A nice feature of the tool is it allows you to change the rotation order but retain the same animation. If I change the rotation order manually, you see that the arm moves slightly because altering the order of the axes changes the animation data. If I instead use the tool to do this for me, it quickly runs through the scene and re-evaluates the animation data, so the arm stays true to the original motion. We can clearly see this in the graph editor as the animation curves and keys are updated. This has the potential to be really useful, and I can see a lot of artists using it to evaluate and update their rigs. Another useful update is the ability to visualise the skin weight values in the viewport. This is enabled in the Paint Skin Weights tool and can be found under the new Visualization tab. You can even use the colour ramp to colour code the text, making it easier to read. It all also updates in real time, so you can see the values change as you paint. This is going to be useful for being able to quickly see any rogue weights, like under the armpit here. Plus it means we don't need to visit the component editor as often, potentially speeding up your workflow. Autodesk have added a relative onslaught of new math-based nodes, which should take the strain off the existing nodes which we tend to shoehorn into our rigs to help with basic equations. This should make building more complicated rigs a little easier for us. Most of them are listed on the screen now, but include sine, pi, greater than, normalize and cosine, to name but a few. Introduced in an incremental update to Maya 2023 was the ability to finally eliminate the double transform issues which often occur with skin clusters. This happens when you have a skinned model, like this one, and both it and the skeleton move at the same time, so the model is being influenced by the main movement and also the skeleton, giving you a double transform, just like we mentioned earlier. Inside the skin cluster is now a relative space mode attribute, which by default is set to world. Beneath it, you also have a relative space matrix option, so you can use another node as a point of reference, which is a nice option. We can now set relative space mode to local, and the skin cluster will stay with the skeleton. If I quickly update the rest of the skin clusters, and then move everything, the model stays with the skeleton, and we no longer have the double transform we had earlier. The final rigging update I want to discuss is multiple skin cluster support, which has the potential to be huge, but at present it does have its limitations. What we can do now is layer skin clusters onto the same model, so we are no longer restricted to just the one. Autodesk suggests this could be good for having a skin cluster for general deformation and another for stretchiness. Another use could be for more flexible cartoon style rigs, allowing you fluidity but also more angular joints at the same time. To demonstrate, let's duplicate this joint and move it away from the model. Now let's bind it and the root joint to the model. And we get a warning just letting us know that the model already has a skin cluster. Let's ignore this and add another. Okay, we can see that's influencing the model now, so let's adjust the weights. I'll turn off the numerical value and just add some basic weighting. You will see we now have the option of choosing which skin cluster we want to edit. And this has been added throughout Maya, so you will see it anywhere where you are editing a skin cluster, like the mirror skin and copy skin weights tools. So this joint is now influencing the model, but using a separate skin cluster. This all sounds great, but here comes the catch. If I move a joint above it in the hierarchy, we get a double transform, something which seems to be cropping up a lot in this video. But this time we have something causing it rather than eliminating it. What's happening is both skin clusters are influencing the model at the same time, making the vertices move twice the distance. What would be better is if the new skin cluster acted more like a layer in Photoshop, so it was more additive rather than a separate influence. Another limitation at the moment is game engine support, but this could also be an issue with FBX and how that handles the skin clusters. I exported this simple test animation and then imported it into Unreal and Unity. In Unity we have the base skin cluster, but not the additional one, as the shoulder isn't being updated here. Unreal was a different story. The second skin cluster is working, but the rest of the model isn't. You can see the torso doesn't match because the head is moving away. As a final test, I brought the FBX back into Maya, and well, as you can see, it now resembles something from John Carpenter's The Thing. So if you're a game developer, maybe skip the additional skin clusters for now until you've done further experimentation. Modelling. Last year, Autodesk introduced a reworked version of their Retopology Tools, which was a welcome update and dramatically improved the speed it took to retopologize a model. It was a good start, but in no way perfect, but certainly a move in the right direction. This year, they are continuing to improve the tools by giving us some additional control over the results. Let's take a look at a quick comparison between last year's tools and this year's. Here we have the same skull scan data I used in last year's demonstration, and we are in May of 2023 now. Let's reduce this model to around 10,000 polygons. So that's taken just over a minute. It's certainly cleaner, but the topology is all over the place, and we have lost a lot of detail. One thing I've learned recently is that it's not always a good idea to use pre-processed mesh, as this can result in the loss of the model's details. Let's try it again with it disabled, and I will speed up the video this time because it does take longer to calculate. So that's taken around 3 minutes, but as you can see, we have more detail now, especially in the teeth. Let's look at May 2024 now. So initially we can see that we have lots of new options, which we will look at shortly. First, let's run the tool on the skull with the same settings as before. So that was much quicker and only took around 12 seconds. Let's now try with pre-processed mesh disabled. Okay, so that was actually slightly longer than in May 2023, and it took around 20 seconds more to convert the skull. So speed-wise, we have mixed results. Let's take a look at some of the updated options now, and the first I want to demonstrate is the symmetry option. This will simply make sure both sides of the model are symmetrical, which is essential, especially with a lot of character models. You have the usual options dictating where the axis position should be, as well as which axis the model should be mirrored across. Let's increase the polygon count this time, and run it. As you can see, the model is perfectly symmetrical now, and much cleaner than the original scan data. With last year's update, I was disappointed by the lack of control the user had over the resulting topology. You could use hard edges to help dictate the edge flow, but it was a bit clunky to use. This year it seems Autodesk are trying to help its users get more usable results, and this is where the feature preservation options come in. Let's look at a different model now. So what we have are ways to guide the topology, and we can use hard edges, as before, the angle of the edges, and also component tags. Now this is quite a dense mesh, so trying to select edges to use as a guide will be very time consuming. So first, let's run an initial cleanup to tidy up the topology for us. Now that gives us something better to work with. What I can do is adjust the attributes to tweak the results, but first I'll pause it so it's not updating with each increment. I'll increase the face uniformity and topology regularity to get things to be a bit more even. And when I unpause it, it recalculates. So that's much cleaner. Let's reduce the polygon count a little. What I want to do now is select some edges, and this will guide how the topology flows when we run the tool again. Now I'm just going to use the hard edge option, because for some reason I can't create component tags for this particular model. What that would allow us to do is build a list of edges, and then reference them when we run the tool. Now remember, this is a beta version of Maya that I'm using, so it does have some bugs, but these should all be fixed in the final release. We all know how bug-free those releases are after all. Actually, thinking about it, I did try it on another model and it worked, so maybe it's just down to the mesh I'm using. I had a similar issue with the edges by angle option too, where it didn't want to work on this particular model. Anyway, with those edges selected, I will harden them so the tool can recognise them. And run the Retopology tool again, but this time preserve the hard edges. So you see, that has helped to clean up the topology a bit more. Now with some more time spent, we could realistically get a good workable model from this. Just to compare, I went back to May 2023 and tried to follow the same pipeline because, as mentioned, you do have the option to preserve hard edges in that version too, and it kind of worked. So there wouldn't be a reason to upgrade just for this feature, but symmetry and the other updates could make it worth it. In a perfect world though, we shouldn't need to rely on selecting components. Ideally, we should be able to make the model live, draw onto it to dictate the edge flow, and then the tool would use that to guide the topology. A smaller tool added in May 2024 is the Unsmooth Tool, which sounds like something we don't really need, but in practice I can see it being extremely useful. What this tool does is takes a previously smoothed mesh, like this, and simply drops the resolution back. Now this will only work with a mesh that was previously smoothed using the Catmull-Clark algorithm, but as you can see, it quickly reduces the polygon count for us. So if you've imported the model from another application, or you're using a previously baked mesh, you can quickly generate a lower resolution proxy model, which is more efficient and better for animation. Or alternatively, use Unsmooth to get a good head start on retopology. The final modelling update I want to show you are the improvements to live objects. First, you can now work with the Quad Draw tool on smoothed meshes, which is a welcome addition. We no longer need to bake the divisions into the model because we can work directly onto it, and the new geometry follows the smoothed surface. Next, Autodesk have added support for multiple live objects. So we can select these objects here, and in the outliner they are now green to indicate that they are live. We can now use the Quad Draw tool again, but it will follow all the objects rather than just one. Animation. There's so much more to show you, but for the final section I wanted to briefly touch on some of the animation updates. Autodesk have been busy tweaking and improving the workflow for animators, including adding more functionality into the time slider, meaning you can do more directly with it rather than having to go into the graph editor. This includes things like improving the key, bookmark and waveform display, as well as making selections easier to work with. There are some new key and curve editing tools too, like the ability to clamp or offset curves. Plus, my favourite addition is then bringing the sculpting tools into the graph editor, so we can now quickly smooth and adjust curves. Perfect for when you're working with dense animation data, like you would get with motion capture. Additional updates. Now, I've just focused on some of the updates that will enhance my personal workflow, but there are so many more. Others include Boolean enhancements, better default lighting in the viewport, and the default Lambert shader is no more and has been replaced with the standard surface shader. Also worth a mention are the host of USD material updates and the new Hydra plugin, which brings Pixar's rendering framework into the Maya viewport. The show menu has also had an overhaul, meaning you can find things quicker. Plus, you can also filter specific components and nodes, so you can easily hide them when you don't need them. You can also create your own custom filters too. Verdict. With the past few releases of Maya, Autodesk seem to have been focused more on polishing and refining tools and workflows than adding new systems for us to play with, and it's no different here. Well, for the most part. With that said, there is still a lot to be excited about. Personally, I love the new rigging and animation updates, but that's more because I can see myself using them in the future. Even the new modelling tools look good, although I do feel Retopology still has some way to go. All in all, this is a welcome update with many quality of life improvements. However, is it enough to make you move from May 2023 or even 2022? Well, I'm not entirely sure. At the moment, if you're happy, you can probably live without a lot of the modelling and animation updates. And when it comes to rigging, unless your entire studio is upgrading, it's not really worth investing time in the new nodes just yet. Okay, that's another video over. Thanks for taking the time to join me, and make sure you also check out some of the other videos and courses I have on offer. Remember, to help support future content and keep my courses free, hit the thanks button below, visit the antCGi store, or join the antCGi club. You can also treat me to a coffee at my coffee page. The link is on the screen now and in the description below. Thanks again for watching. This is antCGi signing off, and I will see you on the next one.